Cast aside, there's no coming home. We're burning chaos in the wind, drifting in the ocean. La, la, la. Through vacant halls, I won't surrender. The truth revealed in eyes of ember. We fight through fire and nights forever. Two souls once lost and now they remember.
Released in 2008, Devil May Cry 4 was the anticipated follow-up to Devil May Cry 3. This entry into the franchise was looking to shake things up. Not only was this the first entry to be on a system other than a Sony one, but there was a new character coming into the franchise, Nero. And he wasn't some add-on to be played after Dante, oh no. Nero is pretty much the main character of this game, getting more screen time than Dante. When the game came out, opinions were divided to say the least. Why? Let's find out. For this review, I won't be looking at the original Xbox 360 version, but instead this special edition which was released for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC in June 2015. Now with all that out of the way, let's talk about Devil May Cry 4. As always, we're going to talk about the gameplay first, and right off the bat, this game is the most interesting in terms of gameplay so far. Why is that? Because as soon as the game starts off, you play as new character Nero. Nero is very different from Dante in several ways. While yes, Nero has sword melee attacks and ranged gun attacks like Dante, almost everything else is in some way different. His sword Red Queen has some cool attacks, but the unique factor comes in with the rev feature. You see, the sword has a rev handle just like a motorcycle, and when you rev it up by using the L2 or the left trigger button for Xbox, it fills up this meter here. It can fill up the meter 3 times, and with each meter filled, you're able to do some crazy attacks with your sword. You can even unlock a move later where, as soon as you hit the L2 button, you'll instantly fill up one of the 3 meters. As cool as all of this sounds, it's one of those moves where it's going to take a lot of time to master it. And at least to me, this move isn't really that useful until you've mastered it. This mainly comes down to the fact that in order to really have this move be useful, you need to get it to a level 3 charge. Charging it manually takes it a little bit, and you'll most likely get hit before you can get it charged all the way. So the best way to charge it is by using the instant charging move, but you need to basically master the timing of when to press the L2 button, which will take you some time. Heck, I haven't even mastered it. But besides that, Nero has another new trick up his sleeve, and that would be his gun, the Blue Rose. While it might seem similar to other guns in the series, it does have one new feature, and that would be the charge shot. Hold down the fire button and wait for your gun to charge, then bam, you can fire a much more powerful shot. The gun has 3 levels of charge, and with the 3rd charge having a special explosion after the shot. This feature makes Nero's gun far more useful than Dante's ever were. Nero also introduces something new when it comes to the Devil Trigger mode. There are now attacks you can only pull off in DT mode. These attacks do absolutely insane damage, but of course there's a way to counter the overpoweredness of these attacks. They take quite a bit of time to charge, and you have to find the right point to charge, or else the attack just won't work. But if it does work, the enemy doesn't even stand a chance. But if you thought we were done with Nero's new abilities, think again, because we haven't even talked about the Devil Arm. This new ability can basically be described as Nero's style move, as when you press the circle button near an enemy, Nero will grab the enemy and slam them into the ground. This is easily Nero's most valuable move, as most enemies can be stunned for this move. This is both a good and bad thing, more on that later. Not to mention the Devil Arm also allows Nero to grab enemies from afar and bring them closer to him. This also allows Nero to grab these blue things in the air and grapple towards them. When you combine all these new moves together, Nero plays far differently than Dante. And speaking of Dante, let's finally talk about him. Dante is on a whole nother level in terms of complexity compared to Nero in my opinion. For one, Nero only had 1 melee weapon, while Dante has 3. His main sword Rebellion, the punching and kicking weapon Gilgamesh, then finally Lucifer, which is easily the most unique weapon in Dante's arsenal. Already, Dante is a massive step up from Nero, since Nero only has the one sword, not to mention each of the weapons behaves very differently from each other. Rebellion once again plays very similarly to the previous incarnations of the sword, with a few new moves for safe measure. Same for Gilgamesh, plays similarly to Beowulf from the last game, but with new moves to make things interesting. Finally, let's talk about Lucifer. When you attack enemies with this weapon, you attach a mini sword that explodes when you throw a rose at the enemy. Like I said, a very unique weapon. That's it for Dante's melee weapons. Now moving on to his gun arsenal. Right off the bat, Dante has his pistols and his shotgun, and both of these weapons have charge shots, although neither are nearly as useful as Nero's charge shot. But then there's Pandora, and holy crap, does Pandora have a lot of ways to kill demons. It can shoot missiles, a giant laser, and can even turn into a Beyblade. So yeah, Pandora is pretty cool. But there's a new feature that makes Dante's arsenal even cooler. You can switch between your weapons with the press of a button. This simple little feature allows for far more experimentation with Dante's arsenal than in previous games. Like in DMC3, while I really enjoyed Dante's arsenal of weapons in the game, the fact that you could only have 2 weapons at a time really killed my willingness to experiment with all the weapons in the arsenal. In Devil May Cry 4, on the other hand, the opposite is the case. It's so easy to try the other weapons out that you have no excuse not to at least test them out. Not to mention, the style system returns and is also better than ever, because now you can switch between your styles with the press of a button. This is big, because again in DMC3, this discouraged the player from experimenting with the other styles, because the more you used a certain style, the more useful the style became. This fixes all of that, because you can upgrade your styles by simply using red orbs, which is the currency of the DMC series if you didn't know. Also, you get a brand new style in the game, that being the Dark Slayer style. This allows you to use Vergil's katana Yamato, although it doesn't have near the amount of attacks that its true owner has at its disposal. So yeah, Dante's a lot of fun. Actually, both him and Nero are a lot of fun, and if we were looking at the base version of Devil May Cry 4, that would be it for playable characters. But we're looking at the special edition, so that means we have 3 more playable characters to look at. So let's start out with my least favorite out of the 3 new characters, Lady. Now yes, I still really like Lady as a character, but as a playable character, it's a different story. Lady mainly relies on her guns for doing damage, with a few melee attacks thanks to the bayonet on her rocket launcher. Now on paper, this sounds like a good idea, but there are some major flaws here. One problem being that if you want to do some major damage, especially on bosses, you have to charge her weapons. Lady has 3 weapons, those being her pistols, a shotgun, and the Kalina Ann rocket launcher, and each of these weapons have 3 levels of charging. This means that when playing as Lady, you'll probably spend a majority of the time just charging your guns in order to do some decent damage. Yes, you do the same thing as Nero, but Nero also has a lot more interesting attacks that he can pull off between charging your gun. The second problem I have with Lady is simple. She doesn't play like a Devil May Cry character. What I mean by this is that guns have never been the primary focus in combat. It's always been about the melee combat. Now it makes sense why Lady mainly uses guns, but again it just doesn't make for a very enjoyable player experience in my opinion. Thankfully though, Trish is far more enjoyable to play as. This is the first time Trish has been playable in the series. Wait, what? She was playable in DMC 2? Are we really gonna count that though? Her gameplay is simple but a whole lot of fun. She only has 1 melee weapon, that being the Devil Sword Sparta. However, depending on whether or not she throws the sword, certain moves will be performed differently. As for her guns, she only has her 2 pistols and Pandora, which performs exactly as it does with Dante. Also, important thing to mention, Trish actually has a Devil Trigger mode. This is important because I forgot to mention that Lady does not have a Devil Trigger mode. Instead, she throws grenades that sometimes do massive damage to the enemy. Yet another reason why Lady is not all that fun to play as. Now there's one more playable character that was added in the special edition of the game, and I think we all know who that is.
Now I'm a little motivated.
Vergil is back, and frankly, he's awesome. He's easily my favorite character to play as. Yeah, you heard me. All 3 of his weapons from the previous game return. Yamato, Beowulf, and Force Edge. Each of these weapons are fun in their own way. Yamato is fun because of its super fast attacks, and its ability to break the game. More on that in a little bit. Force Edge might just seem like Vergil's version of Dante's sword with a few new moves for safe measure, which it kind of is, but it's still very cool. Then there's Beowulf, which as far as I know behaves almost exactly as it did in Devil May Cry 3. All of these weapons make Vergil an amazing character to play as, but Vergil has one more feature that makes him just a little bit more interesting to play as: the concentration meter. That meter in the top left corner of the screen can be filled up by doing certain things during combat. For example, dodging attacks, locking onto an enemy, and walking. Okay then. Filling up the meter makes your attacks behave a bit differently, but that's not the main reason you want to fill up the concentration meter. You want to fill it up so you can use Judgment Cut End. So yeah, this is easily the most powerful move in Vergil's arsenal. And to make it even more powerful, it's not all that hard to pull off. Charge your concentration meter, and go into Devil Trigger mode and just have at it. So that's all of the playable characters. Now let's move on to the other parts of the gameplay, specifically the boss fights. Oh boy. I'm gonna get the two good bosses out of the way first. Kratos is awesome. He is simply amazing. For one, Kratos is able to block almost every single attack you can do, making you think about when you can attack him. This also makes you play aggressively when you can attack him. You have to play smart with Kratos, and that's why I think Kratos is so fun. He makes you think and stay on your toes. But he's not my favorite boss in the game. And for those who have played the game, you probably know who my favorite is. That's right, it's Dante. For the first time in the series, you can fight Dante, and it's just as awesome as you might think. Dante can use every single attack that you've used as him throughout the various games, like his 3-hit combo, the Million Stab, and the Stinger attack. Not to mention, you can hear Dante changing styles during the fight. But besides just how cool it is to see Dante performing all these moves, the fight itself is just really good. If you saw my Devil May Cry 1 video, you'll know I love fights where it feels like you and the enemy are equals, and I think this fight is the best example of that in this game. For every attack that you have, Dante has a counter attack. Shoot at him, he'll shoot back at you. You have to really watch closely and find the opening because it's hard to actually find out when you can go in for an attack. These two fights represent an overall high point of the game. Now there are other bosses in the game, but in my opinion they don't warrant being talked about as much as Kratos or Dante. So we're gonna quickly go through these next bosses. Burial is fine. Not good, not terrible, but he doesn't really stand out all that much. Bale and Dagon? This boss would be way more enjoyable if it just didn't run away for half the fight. Same complaint goes to the Echidna. Would enjoy this fight much more if she didn't spend half of the fight running away from you. Now if the fight was against Knuckles the Echidna from the Sonic the Hedgehog series, then this would be perfect. Then there's Agnes. Honestly, I would probably enjoy this fight as much as Kratos if he didn't spend the whole fight spawning annoying enemies. What now? Oh. All the bosses I just mentioned, you have to fight them 3 times? Does that include Dante and Kratos? It doesn't? Just the bosses I didn't enjoy? Let's just talk about the last bosses. The last 2 bosses are a special kinda bad. They make the final missions almost unplayable in my opinion. In fact, these last bosses might just be my least favorite in the entire series. What are those bosses, you may ask? Well, they would be the Savior statue and Sanctus. Savior is a giant statue that has 2 phases to his fight. In the first phase, you can only damage him by destroying the blue jewels around his body. After you destroy all the blue jewels, you enter into the second phase, where he has an actual health bar. This boss is dumb. It takes too long, and instead of fighting, you're jumping around the arena the whole time just trying to hit him. But there's one thing that I can say about the Savior. and that's I'd rather fight him than Sanctus. Sanctus is the main villain of the game, but that doesn't mean he is fun to fight. Quite the opposite, actually. For one, just listen. Oh my gosh, shut up! He just will not stop talking! Another thing is that you have to fight him twice. Now the first time isn't terrible. The second time, on the other hand, oh boy. He is so dang fast in this fight that keeping up with him becomes a challenge in of itself. It just boils down to me not enjoying this fight very much, which is something I can say for a large majority of the bosses in the game, sadly. But finally, with that out of the way, we've reached the end of the gameplay section. Now there's more to say, but I'll get back to that later on in the review. For now, we can finally move on to the story, so skip to this point here if you want to avoid spoilers. The story starts out with new character Nero trying to get somewhere while being attacked by demons. It turns out that Nero is trying to see his love interest Kyrie as she is performing opera, I guess? Afterwards, Sanctus comes out and he starts talking about Sparta, aka Dante's dad. Later on in the game, it's revealed that this is actually a church that is worshipping Sparta. They're called the Order of the Sword. But back to the beginning of the game. While Sanctus is talking, Nero decides to leave, but before he can, Dante literally drops in and caps Sanctus in the face. This leads to a battle between Dante and Nero, and already we can tell that the fantastic cutscenes from Devil May Cry 3 have returned in full force.
Jacked up notion of fair play, pal. And it's beginning to piss me off.
At one point during the fight, Dante strikes Nero's devil arm that he was hiding in his cast. After that, Dante escapes and Nero is told by Credo, Kyrie's brother, to go after him. So Nero does. This leads him to an old castle where underground there seems to be a sort of lab. It's here where we meet Agnes, who is a scientist in the Order of the Sword. He is trying to restore Vergil's old katana Yamato. After a battle, Nero gets ambushed by a bunch of knights, and then something interesting happens. I feel like I've seen this somewhere before. I'm sure it's nothing. So now Nero has Yamato, and he starts to think that the Order isn't up to anything good. He decides to meet back up with Credo and discuss his findings with him. But before that, we learn some things about the Order that gives off the impression that maybe these guys aren't exactly good. For one, it seems that Sanctus has somehow survived being shot point blank in the head through demonic power from the looks of it. It's also revealed that they have obtained the Devil Sword Sparta, thanks to their mysterious new member, Gloria. Agnes tells Credo and Sanctus that Nero has repaired Yamato, and this piques Sanctus' interest. Credo is then ordered to go after Nero and get Yamato back. Speaking of Nero, he's caught up with Credo. Unfortunately, Kratos doesn't seem to be in a talking mood.
You too.
I have been chosen to take the next step in evolution, to become something far more than just human. I am an angel.
Wrong, Credo. What you become is a demon.
As captain of the Holy Knights, you are now under arrest. It is the wish of His Holiness.
Of course, Nero beats Kratos, but Kyrie shows up and sees Nero's devil arm. This of course frightens her. Agnes uses this to his advantage and takes Kyrie hostage. This prompts Kratos to work with Nero and save Kyrie. When Nero catches up with Agnes, Sanctus arrives and he takes Kyrie away before Nero can save her. Not willing to give up, Nero gives chase to Sanctus, but not before he has another encounter with Dante. And after a difficult battle, we get one of my favorite cutscenes in the game.
That sword was used to separate our world from the demons. I can't have something of that kind of power floating around now, can I? It's gotta stay in the family.
I need this.
Then keep it. Now that you're calm and cool, get going. Hey! What's your name?
Nero. You're Dante, right? Not a bad name.
Then Gloria shows up and it's revealed she is really just Trish from the first game in disguise. This, in my opinion, presents maybe the dumbest part of the whole story, but I'll get to that later. When Nero does finally catch up to Sanctus, he has a battle with Sanctus, which he loses, but then Kratos comes in to save the day! And never mind, he's dead. Sanctus then absorbs Nero into the statue called Savior. Doing this brings the statue to life. This also means that Sanctus now has access to Yamato. Dante and Trish, who were literally watching all of this happen and did nothing, listen to Kratos' final words, and this reveals what Sanctus plans to do with the statue and the Yamato katana.
Hey, where's that thing going? It's not complete yet, is it?
It is in his heart to save the world from chaos. He will begin by driving it out.
Now he has what he needs. Yamato.
Sparta used it to seal the Hellgate from the demon world. The sword is the key to opening the Hellgate. The real Hellgate that lies dormant beneath this city.
The sword that separates the human world from the demon world.
I think you, the son of the Dark Knight Sparta, are the only one who can stop the Savior now. Dante.
Looks like you've got a rep to live up to.
Looks that way.
Please, honor one last request. Save them. Kyrie and Nero.
Hearing Kratos' final wish, Dante makes his way to stop Sanctus and save Nero. Eventually, Dante goes back to the city that we started in, and we get the best cutscene in the entire game.
It was my assumption that those demons would prove far inferior in the face of your tactics.
You summon and kill. Summon and kill. I fail to see the logic here. Said it. The price to pay for power?
Dante then kills Agnes, gets Yamato back, and takes on the Savior statue. He then frees Nero so he can defeat Sanctus himself. He does that and then he frees Kyrie. Sanctus tries a desperate last move to kill Nero, but fails. We then get another great scene of interaction between Nero and Dante, ending the story of Devil May Cry 4.
I guess I should thank you.
But that'd be out of character. Maybe you should just throw an insult my way instead.
Yeah, that sounds better. Still, I owe you.
Don't sweat it. I had my reasons for helping. Take care of yourself.
Wait. You forgot this.
Keep it.
What? I thought this meant a lot to you.
That's the only kind of gift worth giving. I want to entrust it to you, so I am. What you do from here is your call.
Hey, Dante. Will we meet again?
First off, let me say what I did like about the story. I really like Nero. Even though he's a silver-haired demon hunter like Dante, his personality makes him far different from Dante. He's a lot more angrier than Dante, which comes off really nicely in the cutscenes. He makes a lot more crazy, reckless decisions, but again, the way the game does these moments makes him come off in a very endearing way. Another thing that helps Nero is the solid voice acting accompanying him. Nero is voiced by Johnny Young Bosch, who is best known for playing the original Black Power Ranger on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Speaking of the voice acting, it's pretty solid across the board. Ruben Langdon returns as Dante and is fantastic in the role as always. Liam O'Brien is the voice of Sanctus, and despite my opinion on Sanctus, I think Liam gives a good performance overall. Other notable performances include Terrence Rotolo as Credo, Danielle Bergio as Trish, and TJ Storm as Agnes. Another thing I like about the story are the cutscenes. I could have spent a majority of the story just talking about how cool some of the cutscenes are. Especially the scene where Dante gets the Lucifer weapon. That scene is simply amazing. With all that being said, however, here's the 4 reasons why I think this is the worst story in the mainline DMC series. Number 1, Kyrie is literally a damsel in distress, and other than that, she literally does nothing for the plot. Number 2, Sanctus is not a very good villain, and that mainly comes down to the fact that I have never felt threatened by him, like I did Vergil or heck even Arkham. Number 3, since Sanctus said that getting the sword Sparta accelerated his plans, and Gloria, who was Trish in disguise, gave him the sword, that basically means that Trish is responsible for the Savior statue coming to life. Final reason, and that has to do with Dante. He's completely wasted in this story. For one, during the half of the game where you play as Dante, nothing important happens during this section of the game. Not to mention, Dante simply has an attitude of he just doesn't care. Even when he is watching a town full of innocent people be killed and terrorized, he just watches from a distance and makes some one-liners. Because Dante doesn't care, it makes me care less about what will happen to any of the characters. Why should I care about what happens to the characters when one of the main characters doesn't even care? Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention something about the special edition characters. They get some exclusive opening and closing cutscenes. The Lady and Trish ones are pretty cool, but Vergil's... While his opening cutscene is pretty awesome, his ending one is just lame. He is just walking. And that's about it. This is kind of a waste considering again just how cool his opening cutscene was. I mean, this is Vergil. He deserves better than this. While on the subject of things I don't like, let's talk about the enemies. So normally I don't bring up the enemies that you fight in the game, because I feel like as long as the combat is good, it doesn't matter how the enemies are. In this game though, there is a fundamental flaw with every enemy in the game. All enemies were designed with Nero in mind, but they were not designed for the other characters. The main example being the Blitz, aka this piece of garbage from Mission 15. Dante literally has no way to counter effectively against this enemy. Actually, none of the characters have an effective way to take on this enemy, and it's because they don't have the Devil Arm. The Devil Arm can counter almost every single enemy in the game, so the fact that none of the other characters have an equivalent is a big problem. But I'll take bad enemy design any day over the absolutely terrible level design. Oh boy, the level design in this game is horrible. There are just so many parts in this game where the levels drag on, and it just feels like it'll never end. I could mention some examples from the game, but the worst example is the dice game from Mission 6 and 19. Oh gosh, this is the absolute worst. Yes, you can make it go by much quicker once you figure out the method to make the dice go where you want. But still, in no universe does this ever belong in a Devil May Cry game. And yes, you heard me right, this dice game is in 2 different levels. In Mission 19, you go through not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 different dice games. Why? Another thing I forgot to mention goes back to Dante specifically. Dante doesn't get his own original levels. Instead, he just plays through Nero's levels, but he goes through the opposite way that Nero went. This is such a disappointment, and it makes it seem like they didn't have the time or the budget to make exclusive levels for Dante. Which is exactly the case. In an interview with Archibald, Hideaki Itsuno, the director of Devil May Cry 4, explained that the game had around the same budget as Devil May Cry 3. This explains why for Dante's half of the game, they just used Nero's levels and enemies. It's a shame they didn't have more of a budget for this game, because there is such potential here to be the best game in the series. But instead, it's a mess. That all being said, it's still a fun game. I know I just spent a while doing nothing but complaining about this game, but this doesn't change the fact that the gameplay is still really solid. The amount of depth with each character is what keeps me coming back again and again. Sadly, that's about the only thing that'll keep me coming back. The title of this video wasn't lying at all. This game is a fun mess. Despite how fun some of the characters are to play as, everything surrounding those characters makes this game a complete mess. I wish I had a more positive take on the game, but unfortunately that's just how I feel. And I don't think I'm alone on this, as it would be 11 years before we would get another mainline Devil May Cry game. And that game would be Devil May Cry 5. And that's what we're going to look at next time to finish off this Devil May Cry marathon. Later, everyone.